What's going on, Packer fans? Happy Packers Sunday. Welcome into the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. We've got a great game lined up tonight, Packers 49ers. I can't wait to get it started. Should be a really great matchup, and we're going to get into all of the details and the key matchups that are ultimately going to decide this game and some of the things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. But before we get there, of course, we have to discuss some injury updates from Saturday. The biggest news, of course, is that Elgton Jenkins has been downgraded from doubtful to out. Matt LaFleur mentioned on Friday that there was an outside chance that he could play on Sunday. That is no longer the case. He is officially out for the game, which I don't need to tell you is a massive blow for this Packers offensive line going up against Nick Bosa and the rest of the group. We'll see if Eric Armstead and some of those guys are healthy enough to play. I'm assuming they will be. But either way, this is going to be a very tough matchup. Without Elgton Jenkins, would have been a tough matchup with Elgton Jenkins. If you're curious what options could line up at offensive tackle for the Packers, make sure to check out yesterday's episode where I went and reviewed all the different options. But my guess is some form of Billy Turner, Dennis Kelly on the outsides, maybe one's on the left, maybe vice versa. We'll see what they go with. But ultimately, no matter what they line up with, it's not going to exude a ton of confidence. But that's what these situations are for, is somebody stepping up. That's why they signed a Dennis Kelly, who started so many games in the league, is to be able to go in there and play these snaps. And we'll see ultimately who steps up and takes the reins and hopefully has a solid enough game that Green Bay doesn't have to significantly change their game plan. And ultimately, that's what you're wanting in these situations. Can who's ever in there hold up enough that you don't have to alter what you're doing and keep in a running back and keep in Mercedes Lewis to block? Like, can they get by enough where you can run your stuff? And if you can't, and if Nick Bosa just takes over like he did against Alex Light a couple years ago, you're going to lose. I mean, it's literally as simple as that. You can't have to change your offense that much against an already good 49ers defense. You have to be able to run your stuff. And if you can't, even if Nick Bosa is becoming a terror, then it's going to be a really long day at the office. So who's ever in there, whether it is Dennis Kelly, whether it's Royce Newman, whether it's Yosh Nijman, whoever it is, somebody has to step up and play at least a serviceable game where Aaron Rodgers can continue to run the offense the way that he wants, and they don't have to change everything surrounding that player because that player can't hold up at the point of attack. The other news, of course, Dominique Dafney goes on IR. He was questionable. He gets downgraded to out and then gets placed on IR. We'll see if there's any other transactions on Sunday prior to the game. But right now we know Dafney and Elgton Jenkins are going to be out for this game. Luckily for Green Bay, with Dafney out, Josiah DeGuara seems ready to go this week. He practiced all week. So he should really take over that fullback H-back role that Dafney's been playing. And frankly, he's been playing it pretty well. I thought he had a really nice game against Detroit. So that's going to be a big spot for DeGuara to step into, and I think he's more than capable and ready to take the reins, and really is probably the preferred guy either way. But again, Dafney's been playing pretty good football, so he still has to fill in and play well with the absence of Dafney. All right, let's go through what I'm going to say are my 12 observations that I'm going to be watching through the course of this game, 12 keys to the game, big matchups, whatever you want to call it. These are all the things that I think will ultimately decide this game. And again, the first one is going to be boring and whatever, and you already know it, but we still need to discuss it. It is that Packers offensive line versus the 49ers defensive front. And we just talked about it. If Nick Bosa and the 49ers defensive front takes over and just flat out wins against Green Bay's offensive line, forcing Green Bay to change their game plan, if they can't run the football, if they get one-dimensional, if they've got to keep a running back or a tight end in to help block Bosa, it's not a recipe for success. Not in San Francisco, not against this team. So Green Bay needs this offense to be clicking, and it goes without saying that no David Bakhtiari, no Elgton Jenkins makes that a heck of a lot harder. Now, I have said over and over, I have a ton of faith in Adam Stenavich, and I've said of all the things that are, you can say are going right for this Packers team, and there's certainly some that are going wrong as well. But of all the things that the Packers do well, to me right now, their offensive line development is 1A. From the scouts, really identifying the talent, to the GM and Brian Gutekunst selecting the right players in the draft process, to Adam Stenavich developing those players, to Matt LaFleur having the philosophy of getting those best 5 guys on the field and getting them prepared for Sunday. I think it works incredibly well, and I think they've done a tremendous job of developing that offensive line room. And really, I think Brian Gutekunst deserves credit because in the past, Ted Thompson, for all the great things that he did, depth along the offensive line was never one of them. It was always, if somebody was hurt, it was always a Don Barclay, a Byron Bell, Justin McCray, Alex Light. It was always a player that, you didn't have much chance with. Jason Spriggs, like you had to go into a game just holding your breath, hopefully that guy was going to be able to hold up, and almost always they never did. So I think Brian Gutekunst has done a much better job. He's brought in players like Rick Wagner, Jared Valdir, this year Dennis Kelly. They've always really had, especially these last couple seasons, the depth where if these things happen, it shouldn't be catastrophic. And we'll see what happens on Sunday, but I have a feeling that they're at least going to be able to get by and not have to change their offense too much. Number 2 on my list is the crowd noise. And that might sound, maybe, I don't know, whatever, but think about it this way. The last time this Green Bay Packers offense faced crowd noise was when they lost to San Francisco in 2019. That is the last time they faced crowd noise in the NFC Championship in 2019. And frankly, they didn't do a very good job in that game. They go all of 2020 with no crowd noise, and then they open this season on a neutral site that was more Packer fans than Saints fans and just a pretty sparse crowd altogether, and then a home game. So they haven't had to go silent count. They haven't had to go against anything like this in a long period of time. How players like Royce Newman handle this, how Josh Myers handles this, and how the team as a whole handles that environment is going to be worth noting and worth watching. So when you don't have those conditions for a long period of time, you can forget what that feels like. And maybe it's motivating for Green Bay, right? They've had these road games that are just, whatever, like, sometimes it's hard for some players to get up in those environments where there's nobody in the stands or, whatever. Now they have, that animosity from the crowd, and maybe some people feed off that. So we'll see, but how they deal with that, I still think is a key point to watch on Sunday Night Football. Next is George Kittle. And I don't even know that I need to say more than that. Like, Green Bay has struggled on numerous occasions with really good tight ends, and there's nobody better than in the league than George Kittle. And Jimmy Garoppolo loves to use his tight end, and that's going to be a big matchup. And whether that's Devondre Campbell, Adrian Amos, Kevin King in the slot, whomever it is, those players are going to have a huge game. And Kittle has had success against the Packers in the past. And if that happens again, that's another recipe for disaster, especially for a Packers defense that's struggling right now. You want to make Jimmy Garoppolo beat you outside the numbers down the field. That's where he can be a little bit more, errant with the football and have some opportunities to maybe get some turnovers. If he's throwing, easy throws in the middle of the field, and, it'll be another game where it's death by a million paper cuts, and George Kittle just might take a couple of those paper cuts and make them deeper cuts, because he has obviously the talent to take a play to the end zone at any given time. So he's just got to be a X factor that Green Bay is constantly and consistently aware of. The nice thing is they just faced TJ Hawkinson, who was sort of the focal point of that Lions offense. Hawkinson's no Kittle, but it was the same thing. Green Bay doubled Hawkinson on a couple different occasions. I would expect some of that same philosophy for George Kittle on Sunday. Number 4 is get Jimmy Garoppolo off his spot. And we saw last week, and I think it's not that dissimilar with Jared Goff at quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. Both of these guys want to stay in the pocket, get the ball out of their hands, and not have to face pressure and get off their spot. And Matt LaFleur made mention of that and said in the second half they had to bring more pressure to be able to get Jared Goff off that spot. It wouldn't surprise me if they did the same thing that they did in the second half against the Lions and tried that same thing against Jimmy Garoppolo. Because again, if you're going to have trouble getting to the quarterback with a 3-4 man rush, you just can't let him sit back there and pick you apart, because he will. Green Bay's defensive backs aren't good enough to hold up for a long period of time. So that's going to be key. And really along with that, and the same key here, is how Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary fare against Trent Williams and Mike McGlinchey. Trent Williams has been insane. Like arguably the best offensive lineman in football these last year and really the start of this year. He has been that good. And if Rashawn Gary or Preston Smith are just completely taken out of the game by Trent Williams, that makes things that much harder. Mike McGlinchey is no slouch on the other side either. So we saw Ramczyk and Teron Armstead and the success they had. If this is another situation like that and Green Bay can't get pressure, they're going to have to be creative and are going to have to generate pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo to get him off his spot. Number 5, maybe this is something, maybe it's nothing, but you have to at least be prepared for Trey Lance. I think we're going to see a decent amount of Trey Lance in this game, probably more as a running threat and using some motions and sweeps and everything else you can possibly imagine, maybe some wildcat type stuff, some read option. But I don't think they're just going to be willing to just go Jimmy Garoppolo all game. Maybe they don't. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they don't need to. But I think they're going to try to run on this Packers defensive front. I know I would. I know they had great success with it 2 years ago in the NFC Championship game, where I don't think they needed to throw a pass that entire game. And if you're just going to run a ton, Trey Lance makes more sense to be in at quarterback because he has that ability to do some read option stuff, and the defense now has to account for another player. So I think Green Bay has to be prepared for that. And if I'm San Francisco, I'm using a decent amount of Trey Lance in this game. Number 6 is who steps up front. And we talked about Gary and Preston Smith. They're going to have their hands full with McGlinchey and Trent Williams. Kenny Clark can only do so much. Somebody else has to step up, whether it's a Jonathan Garvin, a Chauncey Rivers, a Dean Lowry, a Tyler Lancaster, a Kingsley Keke, a TJ Slayton. And maybe it's not just one of them playing really well. Maybe it's all of them just playing better. And if all of them can play at least like average to slightly below average football, that's better, because right now it has not been great the first 2 weeks and really going back to last season. And I don't know who you're expecting to step up, but somebody needs to, or at least all of them need to play collectively at least a little bit better on all of their parts. So it's a scary situation against a really good 49ers front, but Green Bay's defensive front, we can talk about scheme and X's and O's all you want. If you don't have the guys up front, it makes it really tough, and those guys up front have got to step up. These are NFL players on NFL contracts, and at some point you need to earn that, and those guys need to earn their money this Sunday night against the 49ers. Number 7 is that scary matchup of Kyle Shanahan versus Joe Barry. On paper, this does not look great. Kyle Shanahan, one of the really great offensive minds in all football. And then Joe Barry has not had a great start. And again, we mentioned that Green Bay is going to have to bring pressure. What does Joe Barry have up his sleeve? How prepared is he? The nice thing is Joe Barry's seen versions of this Kyle Shanahan offense really, going back to last year in practice with, seeing Sean McVay. It's a slightly different variation, but a lot of the same concepts. And then really all this offseason going up against Matt LaFleur's offense. So you would think that they have, the book a little bit on Kyle Shanahan and have had an opportunity to practice against it quite a bit. But Joe Barry needs to step up and really coordinate the heck out of this game against Kyle Shanahan. Number 8 is, can Green Bay get off to a fast start? That hasn't happened this season. Didn't happen really the last 3 games, right? Didn't happen against Tampa Bay in the championship game. Didn't happen week 1 against the Saints. Didn't happen against Detroit. And you can come back against maybe a Detroit. We saw it wasn't possible against the Saints, wasn't possible against Tampa Bay. You want to get that early lead, make things easier on your defense, make your offense stay balanced. And as I mentioned earlier this week, it is a arms race, or just a race, I guess, to see who can get the other team off balance quicker. You want San Francisco having to go heavy pass with Jimmy Garoppolo, and Green Bay to have the comfort of going run pass at any time. That's your recipe for success. We'll see if Green Bay can actually accomplish it. Number 9 is the Packers wide receivers versus the San Francisco secondary. This is a matchup that Green Bay should win. San Francisco's secondary is pretty beat up and just frankly not that good right now. They had to sign Josh Norman and Dre Kirkpatrick, off the street basically to try to help. And this is not when I say the wide receivers versus the corners, yes, they need to win overall. But what I really want here, what I'm really looking for is that those wide receivers win fast. We know that Nick Bosa and that 49ers line is probably going to get home against Aaron Rodgers. We've seen how successful that Aaron Rodgers has been when he's able to get the ball out of his hands and into his playmakers. Those guys need to win fast at the line of scrimmage against their corners. They are better wide receivers than the 49ers corners are, and they have to take advantage of those matchups. If they can, I think Green Bay has a real chance to win this game. If they can't, I think it could be another very long day at the office, because if Rodgers has to buy time and dance around the pocket, it's going to be bad, right? So those wide receivers have to win against lesser cornerbacks right at the line of scrimmage and give Aaron Rodgers some easy options right off the line. Number 10 is handling adversity. If in fact Green Bay does get down at some point again, we can't have another situation where everything just goes to crap and Green Bay folds and it's another blowout loss on the road. We've seen way too much of that. Green Bay needs to have the passion, the energy, the enthusiasm, and really the just the gumption to say, you know what, I don't care if we're down 14-0, 14-3, whatever the case may be, we're going to get back in this game and we're going to win this game. Overcoming adversity inside games has been an issue for Green Bay. And if they get down again in this game, I want to see them stay balanced. I want to see them get back in it. And I want to see somebody make a play and say, you know what, we're not losing this game. Whether it's defensively, offensively, I don't care. I want to see a little bit better of, handling adversity in those type of situations. Number 11, I thought Ben Fennell had a really great point earlier this week. Make this a big game mentality. If I'm Matt LaFleur, make this into a playoff type game. I want to see Green Bay go out Sunday Night Football, make this into a huge affair, and see how you fare on the road with some missing pieces, because Green Bay struggled, in the playoffs, losing in NFC Championship games. You don't get very many of these, sort of big fight feels during the season. When you get one on the road, when you're facing some adversity with some offensive linemen out, this is a great opportunity to put some pressure, turn up the heat a little bit, dial up the intensity, and see how your players respond. And if they don't, that's telling, and you need to fix something. And if they do, all right, now we learned something and can, use that in future endeavors. So have that big game mentality against the 49ers on Sunday Night Football. And number 12 and final one, attack Trey Sermon. Now, I think Trey Sermon's going to have a big game because I think the 49ers offensive line is going to win against the Packers defensive front. I just think that's a really big mismatch in favor of San Francisco. So with that, I think Trey Sermon's going to eat. I think he's going to have a lot of yards, a lot of touches. But this is a rookie running back making his first start in all likelihood. And with that comes poor pass protection potentially. With that comes maybe poor ball security. If I'm Green Bay, if I'm looking for an opportunity to take the ball away or maybe, blitz and try to attack a player, I am attacking Trey Sermon. That could potentially be a weak point. And like I said, I expect Sermon to have a nice game, but that's somebody that I'm going after with a blitz. That's somebody that I'm going after trying to rip the football out. How does he respond? He's going to get a lot of touches. It's a big game for him. And sometimes you just need to take advantage of rookies, hopefully making mistakes. I think Green Bay might be able to do that with Trey Sermon. Those are my keys to today's game. I think it's going to be a really close and entertaining game. Let's hope that's the case, or maybe Green Bay gets a blow. You never know, right? But I'm going to say 49ers 27-20. I think, I don't think this is a great matchup. Green Bay on a short week, having to fly to San Francisco, no Elton Jenkins. I think Green Bay's still learning the Joe Barry defense. I don't think they're in a great spot to stop an offense that's as well coached as a Kyle Shanahan's. And I think Green Bay is going to have to play a really good game. And can they do that? Yeah. Can they win this game? Absolutely. But they're going to have to play really good football. I haven't seen that out of Green Bay. They've played a couple quarters in the second half against Detroit pretty well. Outside of that, it's been 6 quarters of not great football. So they have their work cut out for them. Can they do it? Yes. But if they can, will remain to be seen. Thanks so much for joining me today. Always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow with a game recap. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.